If I may, there was a table published in the Times in London yesterday that showed the spread of toxic debt in banks across the world. And to go back to Australia, our banking system appears to be relatively clear of that level of toxic debt. The government's now calling for an international agreement to manage this problem. Would you support such an international framework?
Well, the Prime Minister's been very clear that this is a global crisis and it needs global solutions. That doesn't mean you have a single policy for the whole world. In a number of areas, there are going to be different countries or different regions that have their own approaches. But what's important is that there's proper coordination, proper alignment, and proper consistency between the different parts of the world. Because London, to take that as an example, the City of London is a home for many banks. They're not just British banks. They're banks from all over the world. And what is a problem is if you've got inconsistency of regulation and lack of transparency about regulation, because that's where you end up in big troubles. So certainly the commitment to a coordinated framework, a consistent framework, and an aligned framework between different regulatory practices around the world is very important. In Europe, we have a slightly different political situation with the European Union, and we've published proposals at the end of last week through our Chancellor of the Exchequer, our Finance Minister, for how Europe can make sure that its financial infrastructure is properly geared for the current problems.
Yes, South Africa has already indicated that it will push for Zimbabwe's huge debt to the IMF, amongst others, be written off at this G20 summit. Would you support that?
Well, I think Zimbabwe is in a relatively unique situation. We've had the tragedy of the loss of the Prime Minister's wife in Zimbabwe the weekend in a tragic accident. It's a country that's trying to pull itself out of a vicious circle of economic and political and security decline with terrible violence as well as economic decomposition. I think that we've been clear that the international community needs to be ready to engage positively with Zimbabwe when the Zimbabwe government shows that the people who are elected to government, the opposition, actually have their hands on the levers of power and are able to exercise that power. And that's the process that we're going through at the moment. Obviously, it's important that Prime Minister Tsvangirai, his finance minister, his other ministers are able to exercise proper power, that political prisoners are released. But as soon as the government shows itself to be able to be a positive partner, we want to engage.
Which can you think could be the input from Spain coming to this meeting, although it doesn't belong to the G20, but it's being invited to the summit? From its experience in the banking system, its supervision system has worked very well. There's no toxic debt. What can be the experience from Spain?
Well, I think that Prime Minister Zapatero made a very positive contribution to the Washington meeting in November. He brought the expertise and experience of Spain's specialism in financial services. I think that was very positive. And at the London summit, I hope that Prime Minister Zapatero will bring his experience and expertise across the whole range of issues that are there. Every country at the summit is an equal partner with an equal say, and I think that the contribution of countries like Spain, like all the other countries, is going to be important to relate their particular national experience to the global problems, and that is the key to success.
If G20 fails the expectations, will it be worse, adverse on the situation?
Well, I think that we are clear that the world needs to come together and take some important decisions. We are not inflating expectations, but it's certainly worth trying to take the common decisions, because the world will certainly be poorer if it doesn't take decisive and positive action at the moment.